Jones.
Hello, I'm Matthew Ewing, Vice President for Advancement at Boise State University. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our President's Club Spring Celebration. Our Spring Celebration is a special tradition where we recognize and honor our most valued donors and celebrate the many achievements enabled by philanthropy. Normally, we'd be gathered to celebrate on campus, but due to the circumstances that all of us are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, we're bringing this year's celebration live online. Much of what you'll experience today through our updates from Dr. Trump to the lecture from Dr. Brand is not unlike what our students have experienced if they've transitioned from the instruction they've received in class to a virtual learning environment. Even with everything that we're going through in today's world, we still have a lot to celebrate, and certainly we have a lot to celebrate at Boise State. And much of that is because of each of you. Because of your support, we are able to help ensure the success of our students by reducing the expense of their education and providing a college experience that is both affordable and accessible to students with great potential, no matter their background. Philanthropic support of our programs provide opportunities for students to expand their knowledge outside of the classroom and gain hands-on, real-world experiences. Your support of our faculty and researchers and scholars, like Dr. Brand, who you'll hear from today, assist them in leading discovery and innovation to solve global problems, advance Idaho's economy, and better our quality of life. The power of giving has far-reaching impact. It is reflected in much of what we do as a university, and for that we say a heartfelt thank you. We're happy to have all of you here today, and we're certainly happy to have the university president, Dr. Marlene Tromp, join us to provide a university update. Dr. Tromp is finishing her first year at Boise State, where she's serving as the 7th president of the university. And before I hand it off to her for a quick review of the year, we have a brief video to show you.
The byword there, innovation, innovation, innovation. If there were new ways to do the work better, we wanted to find them.
Done in tournament time, four-peat history for Boise State.
I'm really proud as the guy that gets to be a part of all those things, to see them rewarded for the work they've done.
And congratulations, the Boise State Broncos, champions of the Mountain West, for a record-tying 4th time.
Thank you for that. As you see, we have a lot to celebrate here and a lot to be proud of what's been accomplished. And as I said in the opening remarks, much of that is because of what the support you provide. Dr. Tromp, I'll pass it off to you to provide a university update. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. And I want to thank all of you for your extraordinary support. This has been an incredibly difficult few months for people all over the country and all over the world. We have faced such extraordinary challenges and hardship. I thought Matthew's metaphor of the fact that our students and our faculty and our staff all had to move online was, and that this event has been brought online as a powerful way to understand the kinds of pivots people had to make. But then in the wake of this incredible pandemic, to have the economic challenges that followed, and then to follow that with violence in our streets and the suffering of so many people. And we've just had so much heartbreak and pain that it is a gift to me to see the kinds of accomplishments that our community has managed to achieve in spite of those challenges, in spite of those hardships. And it gives me hope that as we look forward, we think about the ways in which universities have done so much to improve people's lives in fundamental and foundational ways for hundreds of years. And Boise State has made an incredible impact. And I believe, as I have talked with our community in this difficult time, folks in all different kinds of leadership from all different communities in the university, as I have spoken with them, I have been so moved and inspired by their courage and their creative thinking and their ways of meaningfully and powerfully responding to the challenges that we're facing right now. We are often at universities the site of health solutions, economic solutions, responding to cultural challenges. We have this extraordinary college of public service that is working to help us understand how we can ease people's suffering. We can be a part of solving our nation's greatest challenges and helping the state of Idaho thrive and all of its people thrive. I believe with all of my heart that this is one of the great ways that universities do their work. So what we say in higher ed is that universities have a threefold mission: teaching, research, and service. And in all of those ways, we give back and we make a mark. And Boise State has been doing that this year. I just want to share a few highlights with you, and I'm going to yield most of our time to the amazing Brittany Brand so you can hear about her extraordinary research. This year, we have made a national impact. We have been named one of the top 50 most innovative universities in the country. There are thousands of colleges and universities. There are hundreds that are in the category National University. Boise State is in that small group at the top of those hundreds and hundreds of universities that has been recognized for its innovative impact in research, teaching, and service. That really is an extraordinary outcome. We've been named one of the top 10 public universities on the rise in the entire country. We've had an incredible research impact. Our institution has increased dramatically the amount of research dollars that have been brought in. And what that means is our faculty are doing such important work, some of which you're going to hear about today. Our faculty are doing such important work that national philanthropic and federal funding bodies are saying, we want to ensure that that person's work gets done, and we're going to provide the funding for that work to get done. That's an incredible impact, not just for the world, but right here in the state of Idaho. We've also done extraordinary things for student success. We care so much about every single student that sets foot on our campus, their well-being, their sense of comfort and joy and embrace of the academic enterprise so they can do their work and learn and thrive. It has been the kinds of things that you would be amazed at, the innovations that our faculty and staff have done to really help our students accelerate. And a new program I've been very excited about this year is that we have really reached out to our rural communities to help those young people in our rural communities get connected to the university so that we're serving every single person in our state. I'm really proud that we've been working on a strategic academic plan and a strategic plan for the future of the university. So right now we have folks gathering from across the entire university, faculty, staff, and students to feed in, where do we go next? How do we take this great university, open its sails, and move even farther down the river. We know we can do wonderful things together, and we're very excited for that future. Now, you all know we have faced incredible financial challenges this year, just like most businesses and universities all over the country. We had already faced state budget cuts when we came into the pandemic, and the pandemic occasioned even greater cuts from the state to our budget. And we don't know yet what things will look like in the fall. We don't know whether students will feel confident and safe coming back to school. We just don't know what student behavior is going to be. There are a lot of polls out there, but I can tell you something that will make you so proud of your university. Boise State is ready. We are ready for whatever challenges will face us. I'm so incredibly proud of our faculty. We have hundreds of our faculty preparing to make their courses totally flexible for the fall, so that if we have periods where students can't be in class, they can work remotely and then come back to the face-to-face classroom when they're able. We'll have some classes that are going to be hybrid, which means they'll be partly online and partly face-to-face, so students still get that experience, but can also work in an online environment part of the time. And then our students, for example, who may have underlying health conditions and be afraid to come back to campus, we're going to be able to support those students with a lot of online courses so they can continue advancing on their degree. So we're going to give our students a whole range of ways to be served by the university, and I am so proud of the way that our faculty have stepped up and been prepared for this change. And I want you to know that what we are dedicated to doing is figuring out how this challenging moment and all the obstacles we have faced in this year can help us become a better Boise State University for our students, our faculty and staff, and for you, our incredible supporters. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all you do for the university. I want you to know that we're here for you in the way you have been for us, and that we look forward to what's coming next for the future of this great institution. Thank you, Matthew, for inviting me.
Thank you, Dr. Trump. And I hope what people start to see there is not only your excitement for this university, but I'll give a testament to your leadership too. And I appreciate everything you've brought during these trying times, but also that lens of what our future looks like. And for someone that just returned to this university, that future has never been brighter. And I know that comes from leadership, but also comes from the folks on this call that help us do that. So thank you for that. So we're going to transition now to our virtual lecture session of the spring celebration. I want to welcome Dr. Brittany Brand. Brittany is the director for the Boise State Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute and an associate professor in the Department of Geosciences. Helping Brittany today also with the presentation is Carson McPherson-Crusty. While you may not see Carson on the screen, she is instrumental in not only the preparation for this presentation, but instrumental to this field of study, and serves as the co-founder and community engagement coordinator for the Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute. She also happens to be a doctoral student, a Bronco for us here, and a student in the Department of Geosciences. So thank you, Carson, for being here today. I want to tell everyone today that, and Dr. Brand will I think reaffirm this, we want this to be an interactive session. So there's a couple ways, those of you on the call that can participate. If you go to the box that says participants, there's an option where you can click and raise your hand. Both Brittany and I will be keeping an eye on that. And if at any time during the presentation you have a question that you'd like to present to Brittany, I'd recommend not directing that at me. She's the expert on this topic. Feel free to click that raise your hand button and we'll take care of that. The other option is for you to type your question into the chat box. If you type that in there, we'll be monitoring those. And at the end of the session, we'll take a little break and feed those questions to Brittany. But again, I think she wants this to interactive. We've got some polling, and all of you, as I said at the beginning, are going to get a little taste of what our students have been experiencing over the last couple months in this virtual lecture. So Brittany, really pleased you can join us today. Thanks for being here, and I'll pass it off to you.
Great, thank you so much. It's really an honor to be speaking to all of you today. So I'm going to pull up my presentation, just a moment. Okay. So you should be able to see it now. All right. So you'll note that in the upper right-hand corner, there is a box for the video or my face. So if you notice, as we went into screen share mode, you may see more people than just me right now. So if you look at the top of that window, you'll see that there's a minus sign, and to the right of that is more of a square, and then 2 squares, and then a grid. If you click that second one, that single square, it should minimize the video so that you only see me or the speaker or whoever is speaking. And you can just drag that video up into that gray box, and then it should be out of the way for the rest of the presentation. So just to give you a little bit of what you're in for here, the presentation goals, I'll start to talk about a little bit about my journey as a volcanologist and how I transitioned. I'm still a volcanologist, but how I got on the path of community resilience. We'll talk about hazards in Boise and in Idaho. I know that not everybody on the call is in Boise or Idaho, but a lot of the hazards that we're going to talk about today are relevant to those of you that live in Oregon and California and even Washington. So hopefully everybody will have an opportunity to learn a little bit today about some of the hazards that could affect us. We'll then talk about resilience. What is resilience? And what is the Boise State Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute doing to foster resilience? And we'll finish with what you can do to help promote resilience for your community. I will also share these slides. So there will be resources throughout this presentation that are relevant no matter where you live, and I want to make sure that you have access to those. So to start with, let's start this video here. I wanted to start with sharing a story of this eruption that I witnessed in 2015, because this experience really helped spark my interest in community resilience. And it's also a great example of how developing a culture of preparedness through effective science communication is critical before a disaster strikes. So I arrived to Chile to work at this volcano the night before the eruption. The next day, I was supposed to be joining a Chilean colleague of mine to install some GPS equipment to monitor the inflation of the volcano. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard this bang, 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 Brittany, wake up, we gotta go, the volcano is erupting. And of course, my first thought was I must be dreaming, because I actually have these dreams quite often as a volcanologist, but it turns out I opened the door and there was my Chilean colleague, Jose. His hair was absolutely crazy, standing on end. We ran outside and I got to witness firsthand this eruption. And I'll speed up the video a little bit here so you can see a little bit more what it looked like from town. And, you know, definitely it was exciting for a volcanologist to be witnessing an eruption like this, but equally as interesting was witnessing the community's reaction to this eruption. So the population that had experienced the eruptions in the 70s and 80s were pulling out lawn chairs and sitting back and relaxing and watching the show. It's like, oh, está bien, hay normal. And the younger population who hadn't witnessed the previous eruptions were running through the streets, rapidly evacuating. Some of them, most of them had nothing with them. Some of them weren't even wearing shoes. And so there was this real mix in the reaction to this eruption. And to give you a little bit of context, you should be able to see my cursor here. So we were staying in this town called Pucón. And of course, I knew the volcano was showing some signs of unrest, so I checked before I went to Pucón to make sure that I was in a safe area. And I knew that if there was an eruption, that I would be safe in this town, because we were pretty, well, so this is the areas that were at highest risk were the drainages. So I've colored the drainages here in blue. And you'll see that the areas in yellow are the roads that go through town. So while the town itself was safe, we were going to have to shelter in place because there was no way that we could get in or out of the town until the eruption stopped and these mud flows that come down valleys during eruptions stopped. If we were to evacuate, and evacuation is always an option for people if they feel the need, the evacuation areas were up here in the hills or out here on this peninsula. And notice that there is nothing out there, no food, no shelter. And so these people that were evacuating with absolutely no supplies were going out to these areas. And, you know, this was just a really interesting experience, because the issue here was that there was a major lack of communication. by the civil authorities to the town. As I mentioned, the scientists were recognizing some signs of unrest from this volcano. The volcano itself is very active. It has an active churning lava lake in the crater. In fact, one of the town's primary sources of income is ecotourism, where they actually take people up to the summit to see this lava lake. So the fact that this was a volcano was not a surprise, but this activity caught people by surprise. And what had happened is that scientists in Chile aren't always able to communicate directly to the citizens. Instead, they have to communicate what's happening to the civil authorities, and then the civil authorities communicate to the citizens. The civil authorities in this case were concerned because it was at the end of the tourist season, and they were worried that if they told the town and the people who were living around the volcano about this potential for an eruption, it would cause panic and scare away the tourists. So instead, people were panicked, people were evacuating with no supplies, and all of it could have been easily resolved by communicating with the town saying, hey, if you feel the need to evacuate, just make sure you have a to-go bag next to the door. This is the kind of eruption you can expect. And the days after the eruption, the stores were closed. There was a lot of confusion in the town. There was still a lot of panic and a sense of concern. And it's just a great example of where science communication could really have helped this community. And when we think about this, you know, it's easy to judge a population living at risk like this because they're on the flank of an active volcano. How could they not know that they were at risk? But in reality, we all live at risk to hazards, even though we may not know about all of them. And so I'm hoping that through this presentation, you'll have a better idea of the hazards that you live at risk from, but also how we work together to prepare communities, to create that culture of preparedness and that resilience that's so critical for managing the disasters in the future. So I want to start with talking about what natural hazards are possible in Boise. So we're going to start with a poll. So I guess first, before we do the poll, you'll notice that in this picture, we've got downtown Boise here, we've got Boise State in the foreground. The river runs through town this way, and then you can see the foothills out here. And you see that there are a lot of subdivisions growing up into the foothills around here. So we'll start with a poll. Okay, so the question is, which of the hazards could cause damage in Boise, Idaho? Please check all that apply. So I'm going to give you a few minutes. Go ahead and start polling. We'll see how you guys do. Very good. Okay, we've got 75% of you, 80% have voted. And don't worry about being right or wrong. I won't know who's answering the questions. This is completely anonymous. So, just, you know, throw yourself out there, take a guess if you don't know. Okay, so most of you have voted. So I'm going to end polling here. A couple more votes are coming in. All right, so I'll end polling and we'll share the results. Wow, 100% of you recognize that we can have earthquakes. That is not surprising to me since we had one recently, and we will talk about that today. And it looks good. So yes, we can have flooding not only along the river, but through the drainages that come down from the foothills. Wildfire is a significant hazard to our area. Volcanic eruptions, 33% of you chose volcanic eruptions. And certainly we don't have any active volcanoes in or around Boise, but we live downwind from the Cascades. Mount St. Helens dumped ash across Idaho in 1980, and a future eruption along through Oregon or Washington could do the same to Boise in the future. So we actually do live at risk to volcanic eruptions. Landslides, we have landslide hazards, so that's a hazard that we have to be concerned about. Severe weather affects us all. So severe weather is something that we have to be concerned about. Earthquakes, we covered. Tornadoes are incredibly rare in our area, but tornadoes are also possible. Hurricanes, not so much. We don't live on a coast, so we don't have to worry about hurricanes. And it's interesting that somebody said yes to tsunami. I'm curious, when we think about tsunamis, usually we think about them coming in from the coastlines, and that would mean that we are not at risk from tsunamis. But technically, if there was a landslide into Lucky Peak Reservoir, it would cause a tsunami, and that could impact boating areas or beaches. So technically Boise isn't really at risk from tsunami, but there are some areas around the reservoirs where if there was an earthquake, that could happen. So go ahead and go up to the top right and click the X button so that you can close that poll. And we've got one more for you here. Okay, which are the top 3 hazards listed in the Ada County Hazard Mitigation Plan? So these are the top 3 hazards listed in terms of ranking, the top 3 that our emergency managers here in Ada County think we need to be the most concerned about. And these are based on the probability, the potential for economic loss, damage, and injury. Good. Okay, so most of you have voted. I'll give you just another few seconds if you'd like to log your vote. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end polling and share the results. So the winner is wildfire, flooding, and earthquake. It's kind of a difficult question, and to be honest, I had to look this up before the presentation, but the correct answer is B, severe weather, earthquakes, and wildfire. So severe weather, when we think about what this could mean, not so long ago, just a couple weeks ago, we had up to, I think, the strongest wind gust we had was 61 miles per hour. So that can cause a lot of issues. My power went out. I don't know if your power went out, but that's the kind of severe weather that we could be talking about. Severe winter storms, ice storms, anything that disrupts our daily lives with regards to weather is what we're concerned about. Earthquakes, we'll talk about that. And of course, wildfire. As you see in the photo behind the poll, there are a lot of areas that are growing up into the wildfire zone. So these are the 3 topped ones that are ranked highest in the hazard mitigation plan. So go ahead and close that poll so you can see the slides again, and we'll continue. Okay, so flooding in Boise. The top left photograph here is from 1943. This is before the dams were put in, and this is actually a flood that initiated the discussion and the need for the dams. So the dams upstream in the river are largely for flood control, but also for irrigation, and some other purposes there. But if you see in this photograph, this area that's flooded in 1943, there were 25,000 cubic feet per second came down the Boise River during this flood. And what's really important to note here is that much of this area that you see underwater in 1943 is now developed. There's a lot of homes and businesses in this area. And now that we have a dam, we have a little bit more control over flooding along the Boise River. But as we saw in 2017, if the reservoirs start to get too full because we get an unusual snowpack or we have a lot of rain, the Army Corps of Engineers will have to release more water because we cannot let the dams get to the point of overtopping. So that could cause a dam failure. A very unlikely thing to happen here, but it's something that we have to be careful of. And just to compare these two, the cubic feet per second coming out of the river or coming down the river in 2017 was 9,600 cubic feet per second and 25,000 cubic feet per second in 1943. But that level of flooding is still possible despite the fact that we have a dam. So if you want to know if you live in a flood zone, you could go to this link. And again, I'll share these slides with you so you can do this later. But I encourage you to check even if you live outside or away from the river, because there are a lot of neighborhoods that actually live in flooding areas or areas that have potential flooding along in the foothills if you're anywhere near or downstream from a drainage. Wildfire, if you want to learn about your wildfire risk, you could go to this link here and type in your address. But here's our wildfire risk, where the risk is highest in the red and the lowest in the light tone colors. And you see that there's a large population in Boise that live up in this area in the higher areas. And I also kind of thought it was interesting to put Micron down here because they live in a rangeland fire region. So pop quiz, just for fun. This is you're getting a taste of my teaching style here, I guess. So what % of wildfires are started by natural ignitions? And so by natural ignitions, I mean primarily lightning. versus human-caused ignitions, which are things like not putting out your campfire, sparks from transformers or power lines, or driving your car after when it's hot into some tall, dry grass. So go ahead and pull the poll up. And so your options are, so again, this is what percent are caused by natural ignitions or lightning. 12%, 24%, 67%, or 84%. Good. Okay, just a couple more seconds. Okay, so let's end polling and share the results. So the most popular answer was 67%. So let's go ahead and close the poll, and I will show you the answer. Suspense. Here we are. 12% of wildfires nationally, not just here, 12% of wildfires nationally are triggered by natural causes. 88% of wildfires are ignited by humans. So that's something to keep in mind if you don't take anything else away today from this presentation, but this, be very careful out there and put your fires out when you're camping. So some examples of these wildfires are the 1996, we had the 8th Street fire. This was human caused by police firing shooter rounds in the foothills in a training facility. So you can see downtown Boise and the foothills aflame. The 2008 Oregon Trail fire was a devastating fire that was ignited by a spark from a transformer. It took out 10 homes and there was 1 life lost. And then the 2016 Table Rock fire, you see the footprint of this here. This was caused by some teenagers, probably, setting off fireworks in the foothills. So all 3 of these most recent fires that have affected us have been from human causes. If you want to learn more, the city of Boise has done a tremendous job in preventing future wildfire disasters through policy and training. So if you want to learn more about what they've done, you can click on this link when I send you the slides. Is this an example of a natural hazard event? When we think of snowstorms, a lot of us, like me, I get kind of excited about snowstorms. I love to go out and make snowmen and sled with my daughter, but this is a natural hazard event. It's an event that disrupts our daily life. It can cause injury and harm. We can have branches fall on our houses. We can have accidents. And so this is definitely something that we have to consider. And this is why severe weather is one of the top hazards that we have to be worried about in the area. And then, of course, earthquakes in Boise. Certainly, if you were here on March 31st, you felt this. And not only did we have the severe shaking, but there was some cascading hazards associated with this earthquake, such as landslides, avalanches along the Sawtooth Highway. So you might be surprised. I mean, earthquake was ranked as number 2 in that list. So why is that? Well, Idaho ranks number 8 in the nation for earthquake risk. The 4 biggest earthquakes we've had in the most recent history are the 7.3 Hegbin Lake. This was actually in Montana, but it was right on the border of Idaho, so caused a lot of shaking in Idaho. The Bora Peak earthquake, which occurred in this area here, kind of toward the south end, and caused some damage. The Soda Springs earthquake down here, closer to Utah. And then, of course, our most recent 2020 earthquake, which was up toward the north part of this box. So I'm curious, this for now is a rhetorical question. How did experiencing this earthquake shape your perception of earthquakes in Idaho? That means how worried are you about the next earthquake? Have you thought about taking any actions to reduce possible damage in your home or injury due to the next earthquake? I want to point out that the earthquake that occurred in March is about, the epicenter is about 100 miles from Boise. We have these little red lines in here, and up here, these series, you see there's some earthquakes a little bit closer to Boise. These red lines are called faults. They're weaknesses in the crust where the crust can slip, causing earthquakes. These faults are only 25 miles north of Boise, and the largest magnitude fault or largest magnitude earthquake that we could expect along these faults is a 7.0. So experiencing shaking from a 6.5 magnitude earthquake from 100 with the epicenter 100 miles away versus a 7.0, which is going to cause a lot more shaking, but much, much closer. So we can expect that if we have, or when we have, an earthquake on the Squaw Fault, which is in here, that the shaking in Boise will be much, much greater. So I'm going to pop out of, I'm going to stop sharing my slides for just a moment because I'd like to talk about this. I think if we didn't sit here and talk about this earthquake experience, we're missing out on something kind of fun, right? So I'm curious, first of all, maybe in the chat box, or maybe you can just shout it out if you want. How long did it take you to realize you were experiencing an earthquake? And don't be shy. You could throw out a, go ahead.
3 seconds.
3 seconds. Okay. It's faster than me.
I can't tell you the time, but Heather can vouch for this, but about the time that I started getting text message from everybody saying, was that an earthquake?
Right. Yeah. Pretty exciting. Does anybody want to share? What did you do when you realized it was an earthquake?
I didn't know if it was the wine that I was drinking or something else.
Right. If it was the wine, you might want to return it. That might have not have been a good bottle.
The garage door started shaking. I went in the house and the dining room light was shaking, and we knew it was an earthquake.
Right.
My husband announced earthquake, and I came into the living room and went, where, when? He said, now, here, and then the shaking started.
Wow. Yeah, good.
We kind of freaked out and got our natural disasters mixed up and went to the bathtub and said, oh, wait, it's not a hurricane. So we definitely were not prepared.
Awesome. Good. Yeah. Well, I'm a geologist. It was my first earthquake, and it took me about half the earthquake to realize what was happening. I had a toddler in one arm, I was cooking with the other, I had music on, and I thought, why is my husband running up and down the hallway? Because it sounded like pound, 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 right? And it took me about, and then he comes out, and I'm like, well, you're not running up and down the hallway. So he ran to the TV and held on to it, and I just dropped with my daughter. I'm like, wow, this is it, but it wasn't that bad. In our house, nothing fell over. Did anything fall over in your house? Some things?
I lost the clock on the wall.
A clock on the wall? Yeah?
We had one plant that fell over.
A plant that fell over? So it was enough shaking that some things fell over. A friend of mine had a bowl of lentils sitting on the side of her counter, so she had about 1 million lentils to clean up, right?
Our pictures are crooked, and one door frame got a little crooked.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, there wasn't much structural damage around here, but it sounds like there was a little bit. There was more structural damage closer to the earthquake. There were some windows broken and things like that. So I think it's...
And there was one other comment in the chat box, and I'm like Joy, I had never experienced one before, but I immediately thought back to my training as a kid, and it actually reacted, and I stepped just right into a doorway, but my wife was across the room and did not respond, and she's like, why didn't you save me?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because those events are rare, so they're not in our mental history, right? And so it takes us a while to figure out what's happening. And it's also really interesting when you're thinking about preparing a community for something and how events shape your perceptions. So for example, before this earthquake, when I was working in Seattle, I would ask people, are you worried about a future earthquake in Seattle? And they said, no. I was in the Nisqually earthquake. I was in school, and we got under the desks, and the teachers were screaming, and we thought it was kind of fun and laughing, and it just wasn't that bad, right? So here, I feel like, we experienced it. It was pretty exciting, but it just wasn't that bad. And so that kind of experience, it's good because it makes us aware that earthquakes happen, right? But in the sense that it wasn't that bad, it means that maybe many of us weren't thinking about preparing for it. So you could just take a moment to look around now, maybe look around at where you're sitting. Is there anything that could fall if the earthquake was was a higher magnitude or closer, right? So you could maybe play that out after this call and walk around your house, maybe your computer monitor, somebody said, right? Maybe a vase. You know, what would it look like in your house if you had a lot of things fall off the shelves? So for a 7.0 along the Squaw Fault, there's not projected to be much structural damage to homes. So we don't expect for you to have to evacuate. So you'll have to shelter in place, but the power could be out for an undetermined amount of time. So you might have to live without power for 3, 5, 7 days, maybe longer. You might have a lot to clean up. You might have glass to clean up. So it's something to think about if you have younger kids. And so it looks like Lars might be walking around and looking at his house. I just noticed the video moving down there. So yeah, I think it's an important thing when we think about science communication to address those perceptions, to better understand what drives people's perceptions and attitudes toward preparing for disasters and how that dictates their behavior. And if we better understand that, we can message properly to help build more resilient societies. All right, so I'm going to go back to my slideshow here. Cruising right along. Okay, sorry, stand by. Okay, where were we? Okay, so now you have a little bit more knowledge about that earthquake is normal for Idaho and very common, and that we can have pretty damaging earthquakes much closer to Boise than the one that we just experienced. All right. So moving on. When do natural hazard events become disasters? So this diagram shows the intersection of a natural hazard, the potential for a physical event like a landslide or a severe storm or an earthquake, and vulnerable systems. So this is exposure, the sensitivity and resilience of a population, critical infrastructure. Where there's an overlap of a hazard area with a vulnerable system, that's where you have risk. So just looking in this bottom right corner, we can, is this area up in the top right corner where there are no homes and no infrastructure, is it at risk from wildfire? Wildfire can certainly, or is there any kind of, in this definition of a disaster, is there a risk for disaster in this upper right-hand corner? The answer is not to humans or critical infrastructure, right? But certainly for plants and animals, right? But when we're thinking about this risk of disaster, we're really thinking about the built environment. And so there is actually a lot of people living at risk, including me. I live in this neighborhood up here. And so that's really how we define the risk of disaster, is that overlap between a hazardous system and a vulnerable, and the potential for hazard in a vulnerable system. And when we think about the fact that over the last, especially just the last 10 years, the number of billion-dollar disasters has risen exponentially across the United States. And this is largely due to the combination of a changing climate, which is causing more severe weather, more severe and frequent wildfires, more hurricanes, but also the impact of a growing population. So in this picture here, this map, this is from Compass, it's a growth scenario for the Treasure Valley. We're projected to grow by 53% by 2040, and this includes a lot of sprawl into those wildfire areas. And so when we think about building resilient communities, we have to, we have to start now, because it's just getting worse with population growth, and we have to be mindful of population growth, especially here where we have our water resources are going to be changing due to the impacts of a changing climate. So we've got an increase in the number of people living in urban centers, so that's going to change our water resource needs. And with the changing snowpack and precipitation style in the mountains, that's also going to change things like the timing of runoff and the amount of water that our farmers downstream have access to. So then, how do we define community disaster resilience? What do we do? How do we build this? And I wanted to read some of the quotes that some of you added when you registered for the event. So resilience is the ability to overcome trying times, events, or situations. Rolling with the punches is what comes immediately to mind, along with being a team player. Back to basics, working together, coordinated efforts, assisting neighbors, mindful consumption. I was kind of curious if that mindful consumption came with the toilet paper issues that we've had recently. Ability to deal with and manage adversity or unexpected events that are outside my control. Resilience is being able to adjust to changing inputs we receive and adjust our behavior to be successful in the environment. So I could go on. All of you that contributed your definition of resilience, they're all correct. And there really is no single definition for resilience. It really comes down to our ability to prepare for, respond to, and adapt and rebound from adverse events. And so the definition that we use as the HCRI, the Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute, is very similar to the ones you came up with. So great job. The capacity of a community to prepare for, respond and adapt to, and recover from an adverse event or condition. The ability for a community to thrive. Some of you added things like spiritual health and well-being. And when we think about resilience, we have to think about the well-being of the people living in our communities. So certainly, when we think about the factors that influence community resilience, the intersection with the natural environment and the built environment is critical. We showed that in the slide with the risk of disaster. But we cannot have resilient societies, disaster resilient societies, if we don't have resilient people living in those societies. So we cannot address disaster resilience without addressing the other factors, such as the health and well-being of our communities, the access to basic needs, healthcare, education, job opportunities, and job training, the social connections and how engaged our citizens are in their communities. So the more social connections people have, the more they feel connected to police, the more likely they are to be able to assist and respond during disasters. The economic prosperity is a big component of disaster resilience in that the most economically prosperous communities are likely the ones that have the most capacity to prepare for, mitigate, respond, and recover from disasters. And of course, strong leadership, forward-thinking leaders that unite societies and work with the community to think about how we can create a culture of preparedness across all sectors. And really, when you think about this is why we exist. This is what motivated us to start the Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute as a volcanologist, realizing that it's not just about educating the community. You have to address their situation, their social situation, their perceptions, their attitudes, and you can't do that from a single discipline. This absolutely requires the integration of and the perspectives of multiple disciplines across practically every discipline you can imagine. So, sorry, I was just looking at the chat box there. So, when I started on this path, especially here in Boise, Idaho, I was curious who else at Boise State University is working under this broad umbrella of resilience. And it turned out there were a ton of us across practically every department on campus working under this umbrella, but very few of us were interacting. And very few of us were interacting with our community. Well, many of us were, but we certainly could do better. And so the motivation for starting the Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute was simply to connect, to start working together, to break down those disciplinary silos and break down the sector silos and start working together to address what is fundamentally one of society's grandest challenges, to build resilience. And when we think about resilience, we think about it from different levels. Certainly it starts with the individual and family level, each one of you, through the community, the region, and the city, and the environment. So we are a community of researchers and practitioners dedicated to improving society's resilience to natural hazards and the impacts of a changing climate. And to give you an idea of who we are, this is our executive team here. And I just want to point to that we have folks from environmental studies, environmental health, community and environmental health, communication, global studies, engineering, our Boise State Emergency Manager, economics. And we have a board, an advisory board of people made up of community members. And I think one thing that folks in academia could be better at is when we have our research that have some sort of societal impact, reaching out to the stakeholders in the society that would benefit from that impact. A lot of times we do this research and then we share our results with them after the fact, but we want to meet with them now before we start research to really foster that community research partnership and research pipeline. So some of the things that we want to do, we're interested, of course, in natural hazard modeling and resilience modeling and identifying ways to reach resilience goals. We are interested in looking at resources management in a changing climate. We certainly are interested in interacting with community stakeholders across all sectors and jurisdictions and engaging them in this idea of building community resilience. And that's really, somebody asked in the questions when you registered, is this new to Boise State? Will this create a real need or a real cultural change both within the university or within our community? And the answer is, I hope so. That is absolutely what we're trying to do, is break down those disciplinary and sector silos and start bringing people together to share all of the great work that's already happening and learn from each other and work together to promote that culture of preparedness. We are interested in creating tools that take our data and digest them into user-friendly platforms that our communities can use to make better decisions and better policies. And then, of course, we've talked a lot about the research angle here and the service angle, reaching out to our communities, but this is an incredible opportunity to develop multidisciplinary education opportunities for our students from the undergraduate all through the graduate levels. So the value to our members, the practitioners, so here with just a Venn diagram, you can see that the intersection is visibility, connection, and collaboration. With respect to the faculty and the practitioners, basically it comes down to, we have more research opportunities, better research because we're integrating our disciplines, so that's transdisciplinary research opportunities, and more opportunities to find funding. So it brings more research funding into the university. The practitioners have access to resources that they might not have access to otherwise, and this is particularly important when we're working with our rural communities. And for our faculty, we have high quality graduate applicants and the ability to really truly tackle real world problems. For our students, there's internships and employment opportunities. They have their own research profiles on our websites, new course and degree options, and the opportunity to develop service learning opportunities. The value to Boise State, before we started our institute, there was $3.5 million coming in annually to promote resilience-related research. We think that we can boost that far above what's already coming in. And that was because there were so many people doing research already under this umbrella of resilience. Now that we're connected, I think we're going to do a lot better. So that's really exciting. And the value to the community, of course, is connecting with researchers and working together to not only identify what the data gaps and research needs are in our communities, but also how to address them. And of course, we're not just interested in certainly want to make an impact in Idaho, but the research that we do has scientific merit above and beyond Idaho, and we will make an impact around the nation and hopefully the globe. So I'm running low on time, so I'm just going to speed through these really quickly. The things that we're currently doing, we've got a wildfire research, which I can send you some information on if you're interested. We're doing a campus survey to learn more about how our campus feels about hazards so that we can create better messaging and a more prepared campus. We created a COVID-19 dashboard in both English and Spanish early on before the state had their dashboard. So now we have a complementary dashboard that's based in best practices and easily digested. On our website, we share information about regional hazards and what you can do to prepare. And our the next big thing, this is really an opportunity to create a strong foundation for our institute. We'll be applying for the Civic Engagement Challenge, which is $1 million for a one-year project driven by the community. We've met with, in the last 3 weeks alone, more than 200 stakeholders across Idaho and have come up with these top 3 things that we're going to do, which is quantitatively and holistically analyze community disaster resilience, facilitate or analyze the disaster network, and identify goals to address the needs of our frontline communities. And this truly is going to be an opportunity for everybody, the whole community, to come together and be involved in this research. And then finally, 2 more slides, how can you help promote community resilience? The first thing is just to be informed. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about hazards here today. Maybe that piqued your interest. You can visit our website, or if you have questions, you can email us. Take action. It's overwhelming sometimes when you read through some of the things that you might need to do. So you can think about this more of a ladder of preparedness, that just take it one step at a time. Every little thing that you do will make you more resilient. And already, since all of us are dealing with COVID-19, we're probably more resilient now than we have been in a long time. And so we can build on this foundation of resilience to continue taking actions to protect ourselves and our families. And talk to your neighbors. In a disaster, I guarantee you the first responders are going to be you and your neighbors. And so it's important to know who in your neighborhood might need extra help. Who knows first aid? Who has a chainsaw in case a tree goes down across the road? And then how you can help promote community resilience with respect to the HCRI. We encourage you all to become members. It's free. It's a platform that connects, so we would love for you to join us. You can participate in our events. If you're interested in that research, I'm happy to send you some more information on that NSF grant. And we would love for you as residents to become involved in that, because your perspectives are critically important. And you can support us through, you can support the research that we're doing, undergraduate and graduate research, and our events. So that's all I have. I'm 4 minutes over time, so I'm going to stop. I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to field questions.
Brittany, that was great. I really appreciate, we're so fortunate to have such talented scholars and researchers and committed faculty members for our students. I think that's a testament, what you just presented today, to what we're fortunate to have here at Boise State. We are at the 5 o'clock hour, and I know this was scheduled to 5. I do want to say that Brittany's generously offered to hang around a little bit longer. We certainly understand folks may have to jump off, but we can do some Q&A now for those that have an opportunity or are able to stay. Brittany, is it okay if I go to the chat box and hit a couple questions to you, and then we can also open it up for some dialogue?
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize for going over time.
No.
But I am happy to stay on as long as you guys want to chat, and you can always contact me. Our email is on the slides, and we will be sending out the slides to you as well.
Yeah, and thank you for that housekeeping item. For those that have participated today, but then to all of our President's Club, we'll be sending out the presentation. We'll share Brittany's information, and I hope that you take the opportunity to engage with her. So I'll kick off a question here, and then we can see if others have anything they may want to ask outside of the chat box too. But so one question here is, aside from communication, what would be your next top 3 needs to have? Top 3 need to haves to increase a better community response to hazard or disaster?
Right, that's a great question. And some of the NSF work that we're proposing would address that. So basically, we need to know where our community is right now. We need a baseline assessment. And experiencing COVID has really put a magnifying glass over some of our biggest challenges in our community, some systemic things that such as inequality, inequitable access to resources, things like that are really what compromise resilience in many communities. And so really working within our communities, the project that we're proposing starts here in the Treasure Valley, but it's just so that we can learn how to do this. We'll be reaching out across Idaho, expanding our work across Idaho in the future. But for each community lives in its own environmental and social conditions, right? So to understand that, you have to actually understand each individual community. And so the ways to do that are to bring together people across diverse sectors, make sure that you're engaging the nonprofits that are working in these really the most vulnerable communities, identify those most vulnerable communities and what makes them vulnerable, and then work better together to figure out what kind of resources could be reallocated to help some of these communities. Maybe it could be things like creating new job opportunities, or maybe some new social services within communities. So really, I guess the answer is, to promote community resilience, you need to know your community. That's the first step.
Great, thank you. How has you, and you briefly touched on this in the response with COVID-19 and what it has elevated in terms of resilience, but how has the HCRI engaged local partners since the COVID-19 pandemic?
That's a great question. So we were asked by Boise State Emergency Management to create that dashboard. And so we created that within the first couple of weeks and published it. And I should say that Carson took the lead on that. She is amazing. And another student, Katie McConnell, they really took the lead and created that. After we created that, we got a lot of questions from other counties around Idaho asking where we're getting our data and how they might get more data. We started discussing the need for more data with Ada County and some finer granularity of data for policymakers. And so, I think it highlighted some data sharing issues in the state that we're working to resolve now and into the future. And so the way we've most been engaged in that is maintaining our website, but also we're involved in a data and information unit, which is a collaboration of Ada and Canyon counties and many of the cities within those counties. We meet once a week to discuss where we are, what data, what new data is available. We're creating a dashboard for decision makers to be able to view so that they can make better decisions locally within their own jurisdictions. So that's really how we've been mostly engaged with COVID-19.
Great. And I see Butch Hendry's on the lecture today with us, and he put a comment in that in Central Oregon, he's already completed 2 resilience projects, and that their major concerns there are the wildflowers and the Cascadia event, the loss of electrical power from the Bonneville, I believe that's a power plant there, and how that affects that area.
Absolutely, yeah. And for you, Butch, and for many of us that live in the Boise foothills or in flood zones, I think one of the best things you could do is be prepared to evacuate. Don't wait. If you have to evacuate, any minutes that you waste could cause loss of life. So know your evacuation routes. Engage with your local fire department, because you might think that there are 2 exits from your neighborhood, but in reality, the fire department is going to shut one down. So that's where their trucks come in. They're going to funnel all of you out this other exit. So the longer you wait to get out, the harder it is going to be to get out. So make sure you know your evacuation routes and practice those with your family. Don't wait, and be prepared to evacuate on foot, because many of our communities in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, some of the neighborhoods, there's going to be a pileup of cars and you're going to be sitting in line waiting to get out, and you might not be able to. So you're going to have to get your family out of the car and walk to safety. So just be prepared when it's time to evacuate. If you are asked to evacuate, don't question it. Don't call your neighbors. Just go.
Great. I'll do one more question, Brittany, and then maybe we can open it up and see if there's anyone that wants to ask. And if not, we'll again hit pause and let people enjoy their evening, and they can follow up with you. But could you end on just talking a little bit more about the HCRI and the academic program that you envision in the future as the program developed, as things like COVID-19 change, how we respond and need resiliency? What's kind of your future vision for the program?
That's such a great question. It's evolving. And through our interaction with stakeholders across the state, we've recognized that there is a need for example, in emergency management. The emergency management world was primarily dominated by folks being promoted into as emergency managers from fire, police, things like that. But more recently, they've recognized, especially with like the new platforms, the new data, the research and disaster resilience, there's a need for college-educated graduates coming in with this theoretical frameworks and disaster resilience. And resilience really, there's so much overlap with resilience and sustainability, for example, that practically at least large business has a sustainability director, and they're working on resilience plans as well. So the field of resilience is blowing up right now. And so we've had a lot of conversations like Boise State should really create a resilience program. And so that's the kind of thing we're thinking about. We're starting by exploring a master's in environmental management and resilience. And we have a project right now where we're actually surveying the workforce to learn more what they need, what kind of graduates they would be looking for, the kind of training these students would need. So that's where we're going to start. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to build resilience degrees from the undergraduate level through the graduate level. We'll see. I mean, it's kind of a long haul. I mean, we're in it for the long haul. We're just getting started. We're very young. And even without those resilience degree paths right now, there's so much that we could do in our classes with service learning, for example. The classes that I taught a natural hazard class where the students were paired with emergency managers, and they created educational materials that they actually had to test in the community. So that was really exciting. And, there's just so much opportunity to build that into our current courses. And the professors that are engaged in the HCRI are really excited to do that. So I guess all levels, from the individual class level and increasing the service learning opportunities, all the way through creating new degree paths from the undergraduate to the graduate level. I think, the sky's the limit.
Wonderful. So we'll pause for a minute. Are there any questions from the group that didn't get put into chat or that may have come up in the last couple of minutes as you're reflecting on the presentation?
Matthew, I'm wondering if the Institute is involved at all in preparedness with regulatory agencies, whether it's city planning, zoning, or BLM, fire management, preparedness rather than response.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Monty. Thank you. It's good to see you. Yes, we very much are, in the sense that, for example, the wildfire research that we've just initiated is a collaboration between the Boise Fire Department and FireWise. And so we're reaching out and trying to learn more about the folks that are living at risk to fire, what their perceptions and attitudes are, and then how we can message to them in a way that motivates them to prepare. And so a lot of the work we're doing with preparedness is with education modules that are not just educational, but actually bring in some of those evidence-based education practices. So like active learning, which, by the way, if we were in a room together right now, like an actual room, we would totally have done this through active learning and group work. So I'm a big fan of that. And also bringing in the psychological aspects, so the research in behavioral psychology that predicts how the steps a person needs to go through before making a behavioral change. And deciding to prepare is a behavioral change, right? So when we do our wildfire work, for example, we survey the population first, then we put them through a wildfire workshop where it's all active learning. It helps them personalize the risk and develop positive attitudes toward preparing. And then they finish with goal setting strategies, from the simple things they could do this weekend all the way to what they might do next year or in 5 years. And then we finish by surveying them again to see if we've influence their perceptions and attitudes in a way that fosters preparedness. So that's one example that we're doing with the Boise Fire Department and FireWise and Fire Adaptive Communities Network. But we're really excited about the opportunity to expand that kind of work, to work with the Idaho Department of Lands and the Bureau of Reclamation and our local emergency managers to figure out what role we do play in preparedness, how we can maybe help with outreach, help with creating more educational materials for our population, or just different ways to communicate. So those are kind of the main ways that we're working on that. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Well, Brittany, again, thank you so much. This is, again, you're an example of one of the many talented scholars and researchers and committed faculty members that we have on this campus. And we appreciate you taking time to share that with us today. For all of you on the call or in the lecture today, thank you for what you do for Boise State. We certainly couldn't do it without you. What you saw in that video and in accomplishments looking back over a year, you're a part of that Bronco family, and we appreciate you. Hopefully, as we look forward to spring next year, we'll be back on campus and being able to do this together. But until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and go Broncos.